Hi there tonight. We drift back in time, far from the glow of electric lights and the comfort of modern beds, to the muddy, candlelit world of a medieval village. You are a young woman standing on the edge of the most daunting night of your life. Your wedding night. Picture yourself inside a cramped, thatch-roofed cottage. The air is thick with the scent of damp wool and smoky tallow candles. Outside, the village hums with chatter, and though no one says your name aloud, you can't shake the feeling that every whisper is about you. Your stomach churns as you tug at your scratchy linen shift. Your best garment, even if it's patched at the elbows, this isn't the fairy tale wedding we imagine today. No white gown, no music drifting through candlelit halls. This is the Middle Ages, and your night will be awkward, public, and unforgettable, though not for romantic reasons. Before we settle in, take a deep breath, dim your lights, maybe let a soft hum fill the background, and ease into tonight's story with me. You're standing in the heart of your village, a cluster of wattle and daub houses huddled along a rutted dirt path. It's late spring, and the air carries the sweetness of blooming hawthorn. Though it's undercut by the sour tang of the midden heap nearby, your wedding is tomorrow, and the village buzzes like a hive of tipsy bees as you haul a bucket of water from the well. You catch the sound of gossip. "She's marrying the miller's son, lucky girl," one woman murmurs. Another laughs. "Lucky? He's got a temper and a wandering eye." You try to ignore them, but their words cling like damp straw to your skirts. In this world, a wedding isn't private, it's the village's entertainment. You, whether you like it or not, are the star of the show. Marriage in medieval Europe wasn't about love, it was about survival. Alliances, land and labor. By the 13th century, the Catholic Church had claimed marriage as a sacred sacrament, turning it into a binding contract before God and community. You aren't marrying for affection or choice. You're tying your family's future to another's, with everyone watching to see if you'll stumble. Some say a bride who tripped on her way to church was cursed with bad luck. True or not, you walk carefully, aware of every stone underfoot. You pause by the well and see your reflection shimmer in the water. Flushed cheeks from chores, flour-dusted hands, and eyes wide with worry. You've been up since dawn, milking cows, kneading dough, dodging your mother's endless reminders about wifely duties. Your world is small, maybe 200 people, and privacy is a luxury you've never known. You share your cottage with your parents, 2 siblings and a goat with terrible manners. The thought of a wedding night being intimate feels like a cruel joke. You overhear older women laughing about the bedding ceremony. Yes, that's a real thing. They'll escort you and your new husband to the marriage bed, tossing jokes and teasing you both as if it were all in good fun. You know it won't be. The village expects proof of consummation by morning, a blood-stained sheet to display as evidence of purity. You smirk bitterly, wondering how modern folks would react if weddings still came with such rituals. You know the answer. They'd faint as you trudge home with the heavy bucket. You can feel the weight of every curious glance. The villagers are already placing bets. Will you cry, or will you keep a brave face? Inside, your mother is fussing over last-minute details. She mutters about the dowry, a few chickens, a bolt of cloth, and a stool. Your father carved himself. No castles or golden rings here. Your marriage is a practical exchange, keeping the fragile web of obligations intact. Still, deep down, there's a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this new life won't be as grim as everyone says. But then you hear a neighbor shout something about your future husband's drinking, and the spark flickers out. Welcome to the medieval marriage game, where the stakes are high, and the wine is watered down. Back inside your cottage, the air is thick with the smell of boiled cabbage and smoke. The fire crackles weakly, throwing long shadows against rough walls. You sit on a stool, trying to mend a tear in your shift while your mother drones on about tomorrow, but your mind drifts elsewhere, to the fact that this marriage was arranged long before you were old enough to understand what marriage even meant in these times. Betrothals were often decided when children were still chasing chickens around the yard. By the 14th century, the church required both bride and groom to consent. But everyone knows that saying no isn't really an option when your family's survival depends on it. You're 16, maybe 17. The miller's son, your soon-to-be husband, was chosen because his family owns a small strip of land beside yours. It's not love, it's logistics. You set your needle down, fingers aching, and glance at your younger sister sleeping soundly on her pallet. She has a few more years before her own match is decided. You envy her. You know your path is already carved. Your mother is still talking, calling the groom sturdy, which in medieval terms means not dead yet. You almost laugh if sturdy is the best compliment. This is going to be an interesting marriage. You've barely spoken to him. Just a few awkward exchanges at the market. A grunt in passing. Then your father bursts in, boots caked in mud and cheeks flushed from ale. He's been at the tavern, haggling with the groom's family over the final details. A pig here, a patch of land there, everything negotiated, right down to your worth. He mutters about how stingy the miller was, and you feel a chill twist through your stomach. If they're already arguing, what kind of future are you walking into? You step outside to breathe. The night air is cool. Stars scattered across the dark sky. Laughter drifts from the alehouse somewhere. A dog barks. The blacksmith's hammer still rings in the distance. Life goes on. But your thoughts are loud and restless. You've heard stories. Brides who wept through their wedding nights, or women who didn't survive childbirth a year later. You don't know what scares you more, the night itself, or the life that follows. You joke to yourself. Maybe if your groom drinks enough tomorrow, he'll fall asleep before you have to deal with him. The thought makes you chuckle. Then sigh, your mother calls you back and she's holding a comb. Determined to untangle your hair, as if that could prepare you for marriage, you sit, wincing as she tugs and stare into the firelight. The terms are set, a few coins, some goods, and your labor as a wife tomorrow. You'll walk to the church, the priest will bless your union, the villagers will cheer, and the contract will be sealed. They'll call it holy, you'll call it fate. But deep down, you know the truth. It's not love that binds you, it's survival. For now, you're just a girl in a small cottage wondering how you ended up here. The fire is burned down to a dull glow, and your mother's comb is still waging its endless war against your tangled hair. The air feels thick, not just from smoke, but from the weight of what's coming. Yesterday's gossip still lingers in your mind, and the uneasy realization that your betrothal was never truly your choice presses on your chest like a stone. Dawn creeps through the cracks in the shutters, painting faint golden lines across the room. It's a new day, and with it comes another part of the medieval marriage puzzle. The dowry. Your family has been haggling over it for weeks now. You're beginning to feel less like a bride and more like a bundle of goods being traded. You sit cross-legged on the floor, sorting through a small pile of linens your mother insists must be included, while your father paces in frustration, muttering about the miller's latest demands in medieval Europe. The dowry was a bride's contribution to her new household. Part necessity, part negotiation. It might include a few coins, some livestock, maybe a small patch of land, or simply items that could keep a home running for families like yours, scraping by in a village where wealth meant an extra goat or a well-filled grain sack. Every piece mattered. Your dowry isn't glamorous. A few chickens, a patched blanket, a wobbly stool your father carved years ago. He keeps boasting about it as though it were a treasure chest. A strange detail, though he once joked that some dowries even included bedding rights, meaning the groom was promised a share of the bride's family's straw mattress luxury. By medieval standards, historians still debate whether dowries empowered women or reduced them to bargaining chips. But as your father snaps at you to fold faster, you're certain of which side you're on. Your hands move mechanically, folding each piece of cloth that once felt like part of your life. The chickens. You raised them from chicks. Their clucks as familiar as your own heartbeat. The blanket, woven by your mother and you during a bitter winter that made your fingers bleed. Each item carries a memory. And now they're all being traded away in your name. You overhear your father arguing about a bushel of barley. The miller's family wants more. You can't help but smirk. If they're this picky about grain, you think, I can't wait to see what they say about my cooking. The truth is, these negotiations are a power play, and you're the prize. No one has asked if you want to be your mother, noticing your distraction. Presses a small iron pot into your hands and tells you to scrub it clean. The cold water bites your knuckles as you work. Outside, The village begins to stir. Carts creak, sheep bleat, and somewhere, the church bell tolls for morning prayers. You understand, now more than ever, that this dowry isn't just about household goods. It's about the fragile balance that keeps the village running. If your family gives too much, you'll all suffer come winter. Give too little, and the marriage could fall apart before it even begins, leaving you unmarried at 17, which might as well be a death sentence in this world. The pot drips in your hands as you pause and picture the miller's son, your husband-to-be. You've seen him around the mill, his face smudged with flour, but you don't know him. Is he kind, cruel? Does he even want this marriage, or is he simply obeying his father, as you are yours? A small, bitter thought crosses your mind. Maybe I should have asked for a better groom instead of an extra chicken. Your mother catches your expression and scolds you. You're lucky to marry at all, she says. Plenty of girls have worse. She's not wrong, but it doesn't make the knot in your stomach loosen. Your father suddenly slams his hand on the table, startling your little sister awake. He's furious. The miller's family is demanding a share of your meadow, the strip of land your cows graze on. That's not just grass, it's your family's survival. You freeze, realizing the stakes have changed. This isn't about chickens or blankets anymore. It's about the only thing standing between your family and hunger. If your father gives it up, you'll all feel the loss for years, but if he refuses, the marriage could collapse. And the village will gossip endlessly about the girl who couldn't seal the bargain. You set the pot down, your hands trembling, and stare at the fire. The wedding is tomorrow. The dowry is still unsettled, and you, the girl in the middle of it all, are caught between duty, fear, and the faint, foolish hope that it might somehow all work out. Welcome to the medieval marriage market, where love comes last and survival always wins. Morning arrives gray and cold. The air smells of dew and smoke. Your mother drags you outside to a wooden tub behind the cottage, a flimsy screen of woven branches, your only privacy. The dowry may still be in dispute, but the wedding isn't waiting. You're shivering before the water even touches you. It's barely lukewarm, gritty from the same well you used yesterday. Your mother scrubs you with a rough cloth as if trying to polish away your fears. This is your bridal bath, not for beauty, but for respectability. In these times, a bride's appearance wasn't about glamour. It was about modesty, clean skin, tidy hair, and a look that spoke of obedience. No silk robes, no scented oils, just water, wool, and duty. There's an old superstition your mother insists on following, washing the bride's feet for fertility. She splashes the water over your toes with such force you almost laugh, though you're too cold to enjoy it. Whether the ritual truly worked or not, no one dared to skip it when she's satisfied. She hands you your wedding dress, a faded blue wool gown passed down from your cousin's wedding. The fabric is stiff and itchy, but it's the best your family can offer. You slip it on carefully, aware that every loose thread tells its own story. You glance at your reflection in a dented copper plate propped on the table. The girl staring back at you looks older than she did yesterday. Maybe it's the dress. Maybe it's the weight of the day ahead, if this is what bridal glamour looks like, you think. I'm ready to go back to bed instead of to the church. The village is waking fast now. The sound of children shouting, cows lowing, the thud of boots on muddy ground. Your mother weaves a small crown of wildflowers into your hair, murmuring that it will ward off evil spirits. You suspect it's just her way of making you look festive despite the frayed hem. Your younger sister giggles, saying you look like one of the saints painted on the church wall. You roll your eyes. If saints had to wear this dress, you think, they'd have rebelled long before canonization, but her laughter makes you smile. A small comfort in a morning full of tension. Your mother steps back and studies you with a merchant's eye, adjusting the flower crown and handing you a pair of worn leather shoes. Another part of your dowry. They're a bit tight, but walking barefoot to the church would invite bad luck, and you've already had enough of that through the thin screen. You hear the murmurs of neighbors gathering. She's not bad looking, a man says. Let's hope she's tougher than she seems, replies a woman. You clench your fists and take a slow breath. You'd vanish if you could, but there's no hiding now. This is your day, your wedding, your moment in the village's endless cycle of gossip and ceremony. And as you step out from behind the screen, the world feels both too small and far too large all at once. Your mother's voice cuts through the noise, sharp, steady, and full of purpose. As she begins to list your final instructions, keep your head down. During the ceremony, don't trip on the church steps, and for heaven's sake, don't talk back to the priest. You nod, half listening, your mind drifting back to the groom. You haven't seen him yet today, and uncertainty gnaws at you. Will he be kind, drunk, indifferent? The preparations are meant to make you feel ready, but they only amplify your dread. Maybe you think wryly, if you scrub hard enough, you can wash away the whole wedding for now. You follow your mother back through the village, the dress dragging in the dirt as every pair of eyes tracks your slow progress. The church bells keep ringing and there's no turning back. You trudge toward the open field where the wedding feast has already spilled into delicious chaos. The bells echo in your head, only to be drowned by laughter, shouting, and the off-key moan of a fiddle. Your flower crown is already wilting. A petal droops over your brow. Your shoes pinch with every step. The bridal preparations left you feeling like a polished trinket. Now you are being tossed into the heart of the village's rowdiest event. This communal feast is less celebration and more endurance test for peasants. Weddings were as much about sharing food as they were about bonding the community. By the 14th century, feasts were often outdoors, and everyone pitched in whatever they could spare. Your family scraped together a spread of barley stew, roasted turnips, and a slightly tough pig your uncle swears was fresh. Some villagers believe spilling ale brings good luck. So you mind your step around sticky puddles, and the evidence around you suggests people have taken that superstition as an excuse to get gloriously sloppy. Your mother thrusts a wooden cup of watered-down ale into your hands. The bitter taste does nothing for your nerves. The field is a sea of faces, neighbors, cousins, strangers from the next hamlet, all loud, red-cheeked, and hungry for spectacle. You spot your father bickering with the miller, no doubt still arguing about that meadow. The groom must be somewhere in this mess, but you haven't found him, and part of you doesn't want to. You are supposed to be radiant, but you feel like a sheep being herded toward a market stall. A group of women with flour-stained aprons haul you toward a rickety table piled with food. They cackle and shove a hunk of bread into your hands, teasing that you'll need strength for tonight. You blush and take a dry, chewy bite, trying to smile. The air stinks of smoke, sweat, and roasted meat. Fiddlers duel with a drunken piper, and the noise starts to throb behind your eyes. You slip to the edge of the crowd and lean against an old oak, watching children chase a stray dog, men arm wrestle over a barrel, women gossip in tight knots. The feast is the village's way of showing it can still throw a party in lean times. But it's also a reminder, privacy does not exist. Someone bets a sack of oats that you'll do your duty tonight, and your fingers close around your cup so hard it creaks. You picture flinging it at him. Perhaps you think sourly, you should have negotiated a dowry clause for peace and quiet. Your mother sees you hovering and waves you back. Face a mix of pride and exhaustion as she ducks between tables to tend the stew. You are expected to mingle, to play the blushing bride. And every step feels like wading through mud. A young man winks and tells you you're lucky to get the miller's boy. You force a smile while your stomach knots. Then you spot him, across the field, surrounded by his brothers and a tankard in hand, laughing with the easy cruelty of men who haven't had to ask for anything. He looks fine enough, sturdy, plain, but your heart does not leap. You are pushed back into the crowd, offered a slab of pork, and eat it without tasting it. The feast blurs into a long, loud wait. You count the hours until you can escape. But escape to what? The church, the ceremony, and then the bed. The bedding ritual you have been dreading since your betrothal. The ale loosens some of the tension. It propels you forward like a small drunken tide. After a final chorus of coarse laughter, the field behind you seems to shrink. You walk the dirt path toward the church, your dress speckled with stew, your crown lopsided, while long shadows lengthen and the air cools. Your mother steers you like a wayward goat. Your father trails, still muttering about the dowry. The priest's words are due to cut you down by morning, and already your knees feel unfamiliar and unsteady. By the 13th century, the church had tightened its control over marriage, declaring it a sacrament that bound you to your husband and to God's order. A priest's role was not merely to bless. It was to instruct and to remind. You will stand before the altar, head bowed, and promise obedience, chastity in the sense expected of you, and a life that will likely be measured by children and work. Some priests sprinkle, Holy water on a bride's head to wash away sinful thoughts. A quaint idea when the village jokes about the night behind your back. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to sanctify or to intimidate. Today, as you climb the church steps, the answer feels obvious. The church looms, its heavy wooden doors groaning as neighbors trudge inside with mud on their boots. The air within is thick with incense and damp stone. The priest, gaunt, with a beard like a bramble patch and a prayer book whose pages have softened with use, watches you with a look that says he has seen weddings go wrong more times than he can count. Your mother nudges you forward, whispering to keep your eyes down. You obey, because in this place obedience is both shield and chain. If you look up, you might accidentally challenge both God and the groom in one go. You shuffle toward the altar, the murmurs of the crowd buzzing around you like restless flies. The priest begins his chant, his Latin words blending into a thick, echoing hum. You can't understand every phrase, but you grasp the meaning well enough. Marriage, he says, is your duty, a holy cage you are stepping into willingly. Never to leave. He isn't really speaking to you, though his words are directed at the groom, who stands a few feet away. Smelling faintly of flour and ale, you risk a glance. His face is flushed, his tunic rumpled, but at least he hasn't bolted. That's something. The priest's tone shifts from solemn blessing to warning. No adultery, no defiance, no skipping church. You bite your lip to keep from laughing. If skipping church were a sin worth eternal fire, you think half the village would already be doomed. Still, the weight of the priest's words settles heavy on you. This isn't just ceremony, it's a contract you can't break. You're handed a simple iron ring, cold and dark against your skin. It's not a token of love, but of ownership. The priest makes sure you understand that. His sermon drifting toward Eve's sin and a woman's duty to submit. You want to roll your eyes, but your mother's sharp stare from the front pew stops you dead. The church's message is clear. Your body, your work, your future, they now belong to your husband. You think back to the feast, to the way the villagers stared at you as if measuring your worth, and realize this ceremony is only another stage in the same performance. The priest's voice rises, and cold droplets of holy water sprinkle your face. The shock makes you flinch. The smell of incense thickens. The air heavy enough to choke your feet ache in your too tight shoes, and your head spins from the smoke. The groom mumbles his vows. You repeat yours softly, your voice barely carrying past the front pews. Then comes the priest's final reminder, the marriage debt, your duty to your husband. The phrase turns your stomach. If this is a debt, you think, you'd rather owe the miller a sack of grain. The crowd cheers as the priest declares you husband and wife. But the sound feels hollow, distant. You step out into the evening air, cool and clean compared to the church's suffocating incense. For a fleeting second, you breathe, but you know what comes next. The bedding ceremony. You clutch the iron ring on your finger, its weight suddenly heavy, and wonder what exactly you've just promised outside. The cheers grow louder. The villagers, half drunk and full of energy from the feast, surge around you in a wave of laughter and noise. Your new husband walks beside you, this flour-dusted stranger who now has claim to your name and your life. His shoulder brushes yours awkwardly. Your mother adjusts your wilted flower crown, her eyes darting toward the path leading to the miller's house. That's where the next ritual waits. You're not just a bride anymore. You're the main event in a spectacle that's about to get far too personal in medieval Europe. The bedding ceremony was as common as it was intrusive. The newlyweds were escorted to the marriage bed by a crowd of family and neighbors, people who saw it as their right to witness proof that the union had been properly sealed by the 14th century. It had become less an act of romance and more a public inspection to secure alliances, land, and, in your case, those few precious chickens in the meadow in dispute. Some villages even hung a sheet outside the next morning to show evidence of the bride's purity. You pray silently. Your village isn't one of them. The laughter around you suggests they might be you. Stumble over the uneven path as torches flicker around you, casting wild, crooked shadows across the mud. The air smells of pitch and spilled ale. Your husband's mother leads the procession, shouting orders like a commander in battle. Her sharp eyes flick over you as if appraising the price her son has paid. Behind her, your mother hurries alongside, muttering something about lying still and praying. The words dissolve into a chorus of bawdy songs from a group of men behind you. You flush with embarrassment. If this is a plow song, you think? You're ready to plant yourself in a different village entirely. The miller's house looms ahead, familiar yet changed. Its sagging thatched roof bending low as if even it disapproves. You've fetched flour here before, but tonight it feels foreign, a place you're being delivered to. Not invited into the crowd presses close, their breath hot and sour with ale. Your husband stares straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the doorway. You wonder if he feels as cornered as you do. This ceremony isn't for you or him. It's for them, for the village proof. Spectacle control inside. The air is thick and smoky, the low ceiling trapping the haze of torches and sweat. The marriage bed is nothing more than a straw mattress on a creaky frame, draped with a threadbare blanket. The villagers file in like spectators to a play. Your little sister stands near the wall, wide-eyed, not yet understanding what any of this means. The groom's brothers are already cracking jokes, one waving a jug of ale high like a victory flag you want to scream, but instead you force a weak smile. If smiling through this is a virtue, you think you're halfway to sainthood. The women begin chanting songs about fertility, their voices weaving through the haze. You grip your iron ring, the metal grounding you against the madness. The unspoken rules of the ceremony are clear. You and your new husband must climb into bed while everyone watches. They will praise, they will jeer, and they will not leave until satisfied the ritual has been done. Your mother-in-law presses a cup of spiced wine into your hands. "It'll help," she says, voice too loud, too knowing. You take a sip. The taste is bitter, heavy with cloves. Someone at the back of the room shouts, "Get to the good part!" The crowd erupts in laughter. If this is the good part, you think, you'd rather skip straight to the epilogue. The room closes in. The air grows hotter. The bed stands in the corner like a stage. Waiting, you are standing in the miller's smoky house, the crowd pressing close enough to steal the air from your lungs. Your husband stands beside you, reeking faintly of ale, his face pale beneath the torchlight. Your flower crown is gone. Trampled back at the feast, your dress clings to you, heavy and rough as a sack of regrets. This isn't a sanctuary, it's a performance, a ritual dressed up as faith and tradition, designed to remind you who owns what. The herbs scattered across the floor, lavender, rosemary, do little to disguise the smell of sweat and smoke. Someone cheers, another spills ale across the floor. The groom's brothers laugh and toast. If this is what they call fruitful, you think you'd rather plant turnips. Your mother hovers near the door, face tight with worry. Your sister watches, too young to understand, too old to look away. The bed creaks as a drunk uncle leans against it, and every sound feels magnified, every stare a blade. You glance at your husband and search for a flicker of shared discomfort, of silent understanding. He doesn't meet your gaze. His hands are clenched, his eyes on the floor in this small, smoky room. Surrounded by laughter and leering faces, you realize the truth. Your wedding day has ended, but your life in this cage has only just begun. He's no more in control of this than you are. And somehow, that's the smallest comfort you can cling to. The priest's words from the church still echo faintly in your head. Duty, submission, obedience, but they feel far away now, drowned beneath the crowd's laughter and bawdy jokes. Someone shouts about warming the sheets, and you force a brittle smile. The kind that hurts your face to hold. The bedchamber is supposed to be the place where marriage becomes real, sacred binding. But as the laughter swells and the torches flicker, it feels more like a trial, with you and the groom as the unwilling defendants. You think back to the feast, to all those eyes tracking your every move, and realize this is simply the next act in their performance. Your mother-in-law grabs your arm and tugs you closer to the bed, pressing a thin linen shift into your hands, the one you're expected to wear for the night ahead. You clutch it tightly, dreading the moment you'll have to change in front of this drunken mob. The crowd's chanting now, their words blurring between half-hearted prayers and crude jokes, and you don't know whether to laugh or scream. If this is a prayer, you think, God's probably covering his ears. The straw mattress creaks as your husband sits down, the weight of him sinking the middle. The crowd roars with approval, cheering as if he's just slain a dragon you're supposed to follow. but your feet feel rooted to the floor. The cup of spiced wine trembles in your hands, the air growing hot and close from the torches and the press of bodies. You catch a faint trace of lavender. Someone scattered herbs on the bed earlier, maybe to bless it, maybe to disguise the smell. But the sweetness is lost beneath the stench of ale and wool. Your mother-in-law's voice cuts sharply through the noise, urging you to get on with it. There's no escape now. This isn't a wedding night. It's a checkpoint. The village won't rest until you've proven your role. You think about the dowry, the vows, the meadow, the chickens, all the careful negotiations and whispered bargains that led to this moment. And you can't help wondering if you'll ever be seen as more than a piece in their endless game. If this is a honeymoon, you think you're ready for a very long nap. You take a deep breath, step toward the bed, and brace yourself for whatever comes next in this medieval circus. The miller's bedchamber is cramped and smoky, the air thick with ale and sweat. The straw mattress, that sagging, herb-sprinkled thing, creaks under your husband's weight. The crowd is packed tighter than a grain sack. Torchlight dancing across the low rafters and rough plaster walls. You're still clutching the thin linen shift, your knuckles white around the wine cup, your mother-in-law thrust into your hand. The room feels smaller by the second. Shrinking under the press of heat and noise, every villager seems to be here, from your giggling sister to the miller's uncles swaying drunkenly in the back. Your dress feels like a prison, heavy and coarse, and the idea of climbing into that bed under their gaze makes your stomach twist. In medieval villages, this was the way. The bedding ceremony was both proof and performance. People lingered as witnesses, confirming the marriage had been sealed. It wasn't about love. It was about law. Every dowry, every acre, every coin depended on this one humiliating ritual. Some communities even had songs for the occasion, raucous, embarrassing verses meant to bless the couple. You flinch as the crowd starts one, voices rising in a slurred, filthy chant about plowing fields and sowing seeds. Blessing, you think wryly, was never this loud. The lyrics grow worse. You set your cup down on a wobbling stool and clutch the shift tighter to your chest. Your mother-in-law crosses her arms, her expression sharp as a knife, clearly impatient. The chanting grows louder. You glance toward your husband. He looks as trapped as you feel. Eyes wide, jaw tight, a statue carved out of nerves and ale. Somehow, that makes you feel less alone. You think back to the priest's stern words about the marriage debt, and your stomach tightens. If this is debt collection, you think you'd rather owe the miller a lifetime of flour, your mother, the groom's aunts, a few nosy neighbors. They're all urging you forward now, insisting you change into the shift. You glance around for privacy, but there's none to be found. Every face in the room is turned toward you, waiting. Your cheeks burn as you whisper a quick prayer for a sudden thunderstorm to scatter them all. But the torches stay lit, the songs grow louder, and the air keeps closing in. You fumble with the ties of your dress, fingers trembling, and manage a weak smile. If this is a harvest, you think, you're the turnip nobody asked for. Your mother steps in front of you, trying to shield you as best she can. You pull the dress over your head, the wool snags in your hair, and slip into the linen shift. It's cold, thin, and far too revealing. You cross your arms over your chest, wishing you could disappear. The crowd cheers at the sight. As if this were part of the show, someone shouts, "A fine bride!" And laughter ripples through the room. You bite your tongue and stare at the bed instead, where your husband lies stiffly, boots still on, looking like a man awaiting a dentist's hammer rather than a bride. The bedding ceremony is supposed to bless the union, but it feels more like a public shaming. You're both the reluctant stars in a play you never auditioned for. You take a hesitant step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath you. The crowd leans in, voices overlapping, laughter toasts crude encouragement. Your sister, perched on a barrel, watches wide-eyed, probably memorizing every moment to whisper about later. The men slap each other's backs and raise their cups. The women break into another chant, this one about babies and blessings. You climb onto the straw mattress, the rough blanket scratching against your legs, and slip beneath it. Your heart pounds in your ears. Your husband shifts beside you, his elbow brushing yours, and both of you freeze. The crowd whoops, waiting for proof of what they came to see. If this is a performance, you think, you're ready for the curtain to drop. The room is a furnace now, the torches hissing, the air so thick it feels solid. You stare at the blackened beams of the ceiling as the laughter begins to fade into a drunken hum. The moment everyone's been waiting for has come. The proof of the alliance. The confirmation of your family's bargain. You're not thinking about love, or even duty anymore. You're just thinking about how to breathe. The bedding ceremony is nearly over. But the night, and everything it demands, has only just begun. You lie on the straw mattress, the coarse blanket scratching your skin through the thin shift. The air is heavy with the scent of ale and bodies, with only the faintest trace of lavender to remind you someone once thought this should be beautiful. Your husband lies beside you, silent, tense, his breath uneven. Neither of you moves, neither of you speaks. The crowd lingers, murmuring like ghosts who refuse to leave. You crave silence, solitude, something resembling peace, but privacy here is as rare as a warm bath in winter in these times. The village had a stake in every marriage. The meadow, the chickens, the dowry, all of it made your union a communal affair by the 14th century. Some witnesses stayed well past the initial escort, determined to make sure no one tried to cheat their duty in a few regions. The couple was even given a special drink, a bridal ale, to ease nerves and seal the bond. You glance at the empty wine cup on the stool and wish for more. Historians still debate whether that ale was a kindness or just another excuse to keep the newlyweds under watch, but tonight, as the last of the torches flickers low and the laughter outside fades, you know one thing for certain. In this village, love was never truly private, and neither, it seems, is the night. You shift under the thin blanket, the straw crunching loudly beneath you, and for a moment the two of you are as trapped as birds in a snare. Your husband mumbles something you can't quite make out, maybe a curse, maybe a prayer, and you find a strange, small comfort in the fact that he seems no more in control of this than you are. The priest's sermon about duty and submission still echoes in your head, but here in the cramped bedchamber it sounds distant, drowned beneath the crowd's jokes and the scrape of boots. Someone calls for the sheets to be warmed, and you force a smile that threatens to crack. The marriage bed is supposed to be where the union becomes real, where vows turn to life. Instead, it feels like a trial. You and the miller's son set up as unwilling defendants. You remember the feast, how every eye followed you, and realize the bed is only another stage in the village's performance. Your mother-in-law tugs you closer, presses a thin linen shift into your hands and instructs you to change. You clutch the fabric, dreading the part where you must strip in front of a room full of neighbors. The chanting around you slides from pious to obscene, and sometimes you laugh on the inside because the idea of piety here is absurd. The straw crunches as your husband sits, the mattress sagging beneath him. The crowd cheers like he's conquered something grand. You are meant to follow, but your feet feel glued to the floor. The spiced wine trembles in your hand. The torch is turning the room into a furnace. You catch the faint scent of lavender someone sprinkled earlier, an attempt at sweetness that the smell of ale and unwashed bodies already overwhelms. Your mother-in-law's voice, sharp and impatient, cuts through. Hurry, there's no escaping now. This room is not a refuge. It's a checkpoint. The village will not leave until it's satisfied the marriage is sealed. You think of the dowry, of the vows, of the meadow and the chickens that everything rests upon. If this is a honeymoon, it feels more like a long nap you can't wake from. Still, you take a breath, step toward the bed and brace yourself for the ritual. The miller's bedchamber is smaller than you imagined. Smoke and torchlight strobing over low beams. The mattress, straw and sagging, creaks under his weight while the crowd packs in tighter than a grain sack. Your sister giggles nearby. The miller's drunken uncles hoot and slapbacks. Your dress feels heavy and wrong. Your hands numb around the thin shift and the cup of wine your mother-in-law thrusts at you. Everything about the scene is public. This is proof, not privacy, and the humiliation sits like a stone in your chest. A chant starts, rowdy and crude, full of farm metaphors and bawdy jokes. You picture yourself as a turnip in a field and try not to laugh. The words get filthier. Your mother-in-law's glare tells you to move. Your husband looks as unwilling as you feel, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding yours. Somehow that fact steadies you. You are not alone in being reluctant. Hands fuss around you, tugging at ties, arranging the blanket. The room's women push you toward the shift. There is nowhere to hide. You fumble with the wool, the fabric snags in your hair, and the thin linen against your skin makes you feel exposed. The crowd cheers when you emerge, as if this were the climax of a play. Your husband lies on the bed with his boots still on, looking like a man about to have a tooth pulled, not like someone ready for tenderness. The whole thing feels less like blessing and more like a public shaming. You climb onto the mattress, the straw crunching underfoot, and slip beneath the coarse blanket. Your heart is a drum in your chest. Your husband's elbow brushes yours, and for a moment both of you freeze, aware of how every movement is a performance. The torches sputter. The room becomes a hot, humming furnace. The villagers' laughter fades into a dull buzz. This is the moment they came to witness, the proof that the contract has been fulfilled. Hours pass like minutes. The crowd's chanting slowly quiets, and a few stubborn revelers stagger out. Nudged by half-hearted shooing, torches burn down to stubs. The house settles, and with it comes a thin, fragile quiet. The stratagem of the spectacle loosens, and suddenly the room seems larger, colder. Your husband lies beside you, stiff and silent at first, then finally speaks in a low, rough voice. "This is a lot." You nod, surprised at the plainness, and feel something like the first small hint of connection. He admits, quietly, that he didn't have much choice either. Meeting for the first time on your wedding night is not unusual in these parts. Marriages are arrangements more than romances. Families merged for land, labor, and survival. By the 13th and 14th centuries, the church insisted on mutual consent at the altar. But consent often meant a pressured nod when your family's livelihood depended on the match. Tokens were exchanged. Coins, knives, tokens of union. But for you, the iron ring on your finger is the one thing that matters. Heavier now than it did in the church, you steal a look at him. He's not unpleasant. Broad-shouldered, with a stubborn jaw and eyes that won't meet yours. He's flour-dusted from the mill, a familiar figure seen only in passing. Now he is a stranger whose life will somehow intersect with yours. You think of the feast where he laughed with his brothers, and you wonder if that easy smile will ever be for you. Maybe, you joke to yourself, you've married a sack of flour. The room is quieter now. Your mother lingers by the door, pretending to fuss. The groom's mother has finally succumbed to sleep. Privacy is not yet yours, but it's nearer than before. Every creak makes you hyper-aware. You consider speaking and wonder what to say. Apologies for the bedding song. Nice wedding? Instead, you both sit in the hush, two strangers marooned on a damp mattress. You remember the priest's warning about the marriage debt and push it away. For now, you are just trying to breathe. When your husband finally mutters that he had no real say either, the blunt truth cracks the ice between you. It's not a declaration of love, but it is honest, and that honesty is enough to feel like a lifeline lying there. You feel the weight of expectation settle on your ribs. Fertility, heirs, legacy. These aren't abstract ideas. For peasants, children are labor, continuity, and the future of that dowry meadow. The church and the village both hammer this truth home. A wife's purpose includes producing heirs, and failure is feared and sometimes punished. Superstitions crowd the corners of the marriage. Perhaps your mother slipped a red ribbon under your dress to boost fertility, or herbs were scattered on the bed to encourage luck. Whether these acts were heartfelt or desperate makes little difference tonight. The pressure feels physical. You think of neighbors who never conceived and how their lives changed. Husbands turning elsewhere, whispers following them down the lane. The thought makes you pull the blanket tighter. Childbirth is dangerous in these years. Many women you know disappeared in labor or shortly after, and yet the expectation to bear children presses on regardless. Your mother's frantic advice about lying still starts to make a grim kind of sense. Survival first. Pride later hours stretch. The house creaks outside. An owl calls. Your husband turns onto his side. Away from you, his breath even and distant. The quiet is heavy. You trace the iron band on your finger until your knuckles ache and wonder how much say you actually had in any of this. The answer stalls on your lips. Consent was a formality. A nod under pressure saying no would have meant shame, hardship. Perhaps worse, you think about tricks brides used. feigning illness to delay consummation, and whether any act of resistance could have worked, historians argue about such delays. Were they clever defiance or desperate stalling? Lying here, you don't know what would have changed anything. Yet the exchange with your husband, the small admission that he too felt trapped, gives you a sliver of courage. Not love, necessarily, but the possibility of something that might grow, slowly, from a shared sense of being caught in the same net. The night wears on. The mattress is a reminder of the life you've stepped into. Rough and unyielding, the torchlight gutters, the house settles into silence. And for the first time since the bells, it's just you and the miller's son. Two people bound by vows that were more about survival than desire. You stare at the blackened beams and think of the future. Babies, work, the negotiation of daily life, the way your choices will be shaped by fields and neighbors, and the unrelenting needs of a household. You lie there, the scratchy blanket up to your chin, the expectation of fertility heavy as a stone. The quiet presses in, and the small rituals and charms your mother tucked into your dress, ribbons, herbs, whispered prayers, feel both silly and sacred. They are attempts to seize control in a life where control has been in short supply outside. The owl hoots again, steady and indifferent inside. You breathe and wait, uncertain where this marriage will lead, knowing only that the night is long and the days ahead will demand strength. You are only just beginning to find all of it. The ribbons, the herbs, the half-whispered prayers, is meant to ensure luck, love, or at least a baby by next harvest. You lie there half expecting some new superstition to surface. Like a toad tucked under your pillow for good fortune, wedding nights are layered with rituals here. The village clutching at charms to keep misfortune or barrenness at bay in a world where both feel like punishments from the gods by the 14th century. Customs varied wildly. Some sprang from the church. Others were older than the stone cross in the village square. In some places, brides were given a little fertility posy, fennel, rue, herbs tucked beneath the mattress to warm the womb. You suspect your mother-in-law slipped one under the straw earlier. The mattress smells faintly of licorice. Historians argue whether these posies were symbolic theater or sincere belief. But lying in the dark, you aren't sure which you want to be true. You roll onto your back, the rough straw poking through your thin shift, and trace the iron ring on your finger. The ribbon, the posy, the holy water the priest splashed on you. All of it feels like part of the same anxious ritual. Part of the village's attempt to control a night no one can predict. You remember a neighbor at the feast tossing salt over her shoulder as you passed, muttering about warding off spirits. You laughed then. Now, with quiet pressing in, it seems less funny. What if the charms fail? What if they work and deliver you into the dangers of childbirth? Your husband stirs beside you. Maybe it's a curse or a prayer under his breath. You can't tell. You aren't ready for another awkward exchange. Not with your head tangled in the day's rites. Your mother's whispered warnings come back to you. Don't step on the left side of the bed, or you'll curse the marriage you had scoffed. But you climbed in on the right anyway in this village. Crumbs under the bed are supposed to bring prosperity. A sprig of rosemary promises fidelity. You vacillate between eye-rolling and a secret, stubborn worry that these things might matter. The bedchamber is cold. Smoke has settled in the beams, and you pull the coarse blanket closer. Its weave scratching your chin. You think of the women at the feast. Their teasing threaded with superstition. One pressed a dried apple into your hand and said it would ensure a sweet union. You ate it to shut her up. But now you wonder whether every small thing was a spell you never chose to accept. The church frowns on some of these practices as pagan meddling, yet the priest hardly blinked when your mother-in-law lit a candle to call the angels, if angels need candles. You think wryly, they must have terrible eyesight. Your husband's breathing evens into sleep. His soft snores are oddly grounding after the whirl of ceremony. The posy's faint scent lingers, but your thoughts drift upward to a larger force shaping this night. The church. Its rules have carved the path you followed from the altar to this mattress. By the 13th century, marriage had been cemented as a sacrament, a sacred, binding contract under God. Your wedding was not only a family exchange over meadow and chickens, it was a pledge with divine stakes, watched over by priests who fancied themselves gatekeepers of salvation. Some couples even hung a cross above their bed to sanctify the act. You're pretty certain your mother-in-law nailed one somewhere in the room, though it's too dark to see whether these symbols were devotional or simply another way for the church to mark your bedroom matters little tonight. Their presence weighs on you like an extra blanket. The priest's voice, warnings about duty, debt, producing heirs, echoes in your mind. He suspected you might flee. You would have if the town square hadn't already been lined with curious faces. If God is watching this marriage, you imagine, he might be as confused as you are. The priest taught that vows were eternal and that defiance or barrenness could risk your soul and your family's standing. You have heard the stories. Women shamed or worse for failing to fit their prescribed role. The church's shadow looms large in this little room, more imposing than gossip, more relentless than family expectations. You turn, facing your husband's shadowed form. The sermon about Eve and submission still stings. The message was plain. Women are expected to be the weaker vessel, inclined to obey. You clench your fist and feel the ring bite into your skin, a small, hot spark of defiance kindling inside. You didn't choose this life in any meaningful way, not truly. Yet the church says this is your path to salvation. If submission is holy, you think, you might prefer a day off for sin. The mattress shifts as he moves in his sleep. Your thoughts wander to the old tricks brides sometimes used, feigning illness to delay the wedding night, a loophole to buy time. Historians debate whether such delays were acts of resistance or simple desperation. Lying here, you aren't sure what would have helped still. When your husband murmurs in the dark that he didn't really have a say either, the admission cracks the silent wall between you. It's not romance. It's recognition. Two people, caught in the same net of family expectation and village custom. You stare at the blackened rafters and realize how much is at stake. Babies to tend fields and inherit land. Heirs to keep a dowry meadow in the family. The church and the village make fertility into a duty. And failure falls hardest on the woman you recall neighbors who never bore children and how their lives shifted. Husbands looking elsewhere. Whispers following them like shadows. Childbirth is dangerous. You have seen its cost in blood and screams. Still, the pressure to conceive is relentless. You feel the scratch of the rough blanket, pull it up to your chin, and imagine the red ribbon your mother may have slipped under your garments. A small charm for fertility, perhaps, or simply a reminder that everyone is invested in the result. Whether these tokens are heartfelt or frantic, fail-safes doesn't change how the expectation sits. Heavy and real on your chest outside, an owl calls and the house settles. Your husband turns onto his side, his back a quiet presence. You trace the iron band on your finger until your knuckles ache and wonder how much of your life this ring truly controls. Consent at the altar may have been required on paper, but in practice it was often the nod of survival. Say no and risk shame or worse, the choice felt rarely yours. You let your mind drift through half-remembered superstitions and the more solid authority of the church, whether by charm or sacrament. You feel bound, yet beneath that weight there is a small, stubborn idea that perhaps, in time, the bluntness of this first night might soften into something like partnership. It is not comfort, but a grain of possibility. The torches gutter and the room grows colder. The scratch of straw and blanket, the only textures left against your skin. The village's songs, the priest's warnings, the clatter and clamor of the day fade into the hush of night. You breathe, steadying yourself, aware that tomorrow will demand more. Labor at the mill, tending of animals, the slow negotiation of a shared life. For now, the rituals, their herbs and ribbons, their candles and crosses, fold into the background like a well-known tune outside. The owl hoots again, steady and indifferent inside. Beneath the patched blanket, you lie awake in a world where superstition and scripture both reach for the same outcome. You are raw with the day's exposure, but as the dark presses close, you draw yourself as small as you can and wait, feeling the strange mix of fear and resolve that comes when life truly changes. Your husband's snores are softer now, his arms sprawled across the blanket from sleep's heavy mumble, and in the hush the church's presence presses in deeper. Those sacred vows, the warnings about sin, the priest's lecture, all folding themselves into the dark with you. But as the night stretches on, a new reality settles in, the role of a medieval wife. The priest's words, the villager's stares, even that fertility posy tucked under the bed. They've all been steering you here, to a place where you're no longer only a daughter but a woman expected to run a household, obey a husband, and uphold a web of duties tighter than the iron ring on your finger. In this world, gender roles are rigid, especially for peasants. A wife's work is both practical and symbolic. Keep the home, raise the children, support the husband's labor, and keep the family and village stable. Keep that dowry meadow safe for another season by the 14th century. The expectation was plain. Manage the hearth, spin the wool, mend the clothes, feed the household, and keep the mill's grain coming. You remember your mother's hands, patched cloth, quick bargains with merchants, chasing chickens, and you know she was the backbone beneath your father's title. The village may call him master. Your mother's been running things for years now. That mantle is shifting toward you, and the thought of it makes your chest tight. Some small, odd trinkets hint at responsibility worn like a badge. A housewife's belt hung with keys and little tools. A clinking strap that marked a woman's authority over a household. Historians argue whether such things were power or chains. Lying on this scratchy mattress, you lean toward the ladder. You turn in the dark, the straw crunching beneath you, and picture the miller's house, its smoky hearth, its drafty corners, 1,000 small chores waiting in the morning. You'll be judged by how well you keep it, by how quickly you fill a cradle, and by how well you fold into the village's rhythm. The dowry, the bedding, the church vows, they've funneled you into a role that fits like a costume you never tailored. The awkwardness of intimacy presses at the center of it all. The church spoke of the marriage debt as a mutual obligation, but the weight falls heaviest on women whose value was too often measured by fertility. Consummation is the linchpin. Without it, alliances can crumble and dowries be contested. Your mother-in-law, as he spiced wine, was probably meant to steady you, a warmed cup of courage or just a medieval placebo, and you still feel queasy rather than romantic. People passed around recipes for aphrodisiac brews and gave newlyweds warm posies. Herb bundles tucked to encourage conception. The line between help and intrusion is thin. You lie awake, listening to his even breathing, and think of the odd rituals. Don't step on the left side of the bed. Tuck crumbs for prosperity. Tie a red ribbon at the waist for luck. You remember the posy under the straw and the faint licorice scent it left behind. You think about the dried apple a woman pressed into your hand at the feast, saying it would make your union sweet. A superstition you half laughed at then and now wonder about in the dark, whether these things have power or are simply gestures of hope. They stitch together the village's attempt to control a night. No one can predict when your husband stirs and murmurs. You both startle, neither of you moves. Two strangers learning the same awkward dance. The torchlight through the shutters throws his face into shadow. You can make out the broad shoulders, the stubborn jaw, the flour smudge that marks him as a miller's son. He's not cruel on sight, just quiet. And when he finally mutters that he didn't have much choice either, the plain honesty cuts the tension for a breath. It's not love, but it's something steadier than the spectacle you endured. The thought of children presses like a stone against your ribs, for peasants especially. Offspring are labor and legacy, hands to tend fields and heirs to inherit the meadow. The church frames fertility as a sacred duty. Failure is not merely private sorrow, but a problem that can shame a woman and strain alliances. You've seen the consequences in neighbors' lives. Marriages shifted, whispers following women down the lane, husbands who grew distant when heirs never came. Childbirth itself is dangerous. You remember labor's brutal reality from watching mothers and neighbors in the lean years. Expectation and risk sit side by side, and the fear of both curls through you. You pull the blanket higher, its rough weave scratching your chin, and trace the iron ring until your knuckles ache. Consent at the altar was required in theory, but in practice it was often a nod driven by family need and village pressure. Saying no could mean shame or worse. The options were thin. Some brides delayed consummation with feigned illness, a desperate stall that historians argue about, clever resistance, or simply fear buying time sitting here. You are not sure which would have worked, yet the shared admission from your husband gives a strand of solidarity. You are both caught in the same net outside. The mill creaks and an owl calls once, patient and indifferent inside the hushed room. The torches gutter low and the house settles. The rituals, ribbons, herbs, candles, crosses, fold into the quiet like an aftersong. Whether they were meant to charm fate or to sanctify, they leave you feeling bound to something bigger, to family duty, to church law, to the village's long gaze. But even under that weight, a small, stubborn thought remains. Perhaps in time, the bluntness of this night might soften into a partnership neither of you expected. You lie there listening, while the night stretches and the future's work begins to shape itself in the dark. The expectations for fertility, obedience, and household competence are heavy, yet the first, honest whisper across the mattress, that neither of you had much choice, is a small proof that you are not entirely alone. Tomorrow will bring chores and bargaining. The mill and the hearth, the slow negotiation of days live together for now. Beneath the patched blanket and the blackened beams, you breathe, gathering a fragile sort of resolve for whatever comes next. You lie there in the dim stillness, the straw prickling your back, the blanket rough against your skin, and your husband's quiet words still hanging in the air. We don't have to not tonight. It's a small mercy, but a real one. The tension that had coiled so tightly in your chest begins to ease, like a knot loosening. Maybe he isn't ready either, maybe neither of you are. You breathe out, slow and shaky, and let the awkwardness of it all settle into something almost bearable. If duty is a debt, you think wryly. The two of you have just filed for bankruptcy. The room is cold, the straw mattress unforgiving, and that threadbare blanket, the same one that scratched at you all night, offers little warmth. Your husband has already drifted back to sleep, his breathing soft and steady, one arm thrown loosely across the blanket. The faint moonlight slipping through the shutters paints his flower-dusted shoulder in silver. You stare at the ceiling, wide awake, your mind restless. The pressure inside this room, the church's rules, the priest's warnings, the whispers about duty and heirs, has faded a little, but outside, the weight of the village still lingers, pressing against the walls. Even now, long after the laughter and singing of the bedding ceremony have died down, you can almost feel their eyes. The gossips from the feast, the women at the well, the neighbors who'll track your every step. You're not just a wife now, you're a story, and everyone in the village is waiting to see how it unfolds in a place this small. Privacy doesn't exist by the 14th century. The life of a peasant bride wasn't her own. It belonged to the community. Every marriage, every quarrel, every birth or loss was public property. They'd watch for signs of success or failure, of harmony or scandal, ready to fold it all into the fabric of their endless chatter. You've even heard of villages that appointed a so-called bed monitor, an older woman who'd peek in on the newlyweds at dawn and report back on the night's progress. You can't help but pray your mother-in-law isn't quite that dedicated. But remembering how she hovered during the ceremony, eyes sharp as a hawk, you wouldn't bet on it. The thought makes you pull the blanket tighter. Its coarse weave scrapes your chin. The licorice scent from the fertility posy beneath the bed is fading, replaced by the damp chill of the miller's house. Still, it feels like the village is out there in the darkness, huddled in smoky cottages, whispering, laughing, betting quietly on whether you did your duty. You picture the women at the well, how they'd whispered about the miller's son's temper, their eyes flicking toward you even then. What are they saying now? That you're the lucky girl, or the one who's doomed to fail? If gossip were currency, you think, this village would be richer than any king. Outside, a dog barks somewhere. A wagon creaks over frozen mud. The sounds make the silence in the bedchamber feel even heavier. You've lived under the villagers' scrutiny all your life. When you spilled ale at the harvest festival, when you ripped your shift at market. But this is different. This is permanent. Now, every glance, every whisper will be about your marriage. They'll watch for a swelling belly, for signs of domestic grace, for cracks in the illusion. You think of your mother, how she's learned to navigate their stairs with that sharp tongue and iron posture. You've seen her cut through gossip with one look. You wonder if you'll ever have that kind of armor. Your husband shifts beside you, his arm brushing yours. He's still asleep. But you flinch all the same. That small act of kindness earlier, not forcing what you both weren't ready for, lingers with you. Maybe he feels the villager's eyes too. He's the miller's son, after all, and expected to carry on his family's name, to prove his strength and seed. He's as much their puppet as you are. If the village is a stage, you think you're both playing parts without rehearsal. You roll onto your side, the straw crunching beneath you, and stare at the rough planks of the wall. Tomorrow looms large in your mind. The morning after, the questions, the looks, the not-so-subtle jokes. Will they check the sheets like in those awful stories? Parade them through the square like a banner of proof? You shiver, praying your village isn't that cruel, but even if they don't, the women will still watch. They'll read your face, your posture, your silence, searching for hints. If gossip's a sport, you think bitterly. This village deserves a crown. You don't sleep. The hours blur together until a faint gray light seeps through the shutters. Dawn. The roosters outside break the silence with a shrill, merciless crow. You blink against the gloom, your eyes gritty. Your body stiff from the straw in medieval villages. The morning after a wedding wasn't private, it was public theater, especially for peasants, where a marriage wasn't just about love but about property, alliances, and heirs. The community wanted proof that the union had been sealed sometimes. That meant the morning brought inspection, whispers, questions, and yes, even bedsheets shown as evidence of a bride's purity. You've heard another custom too, one that makes your stomach twist in some places. A new bride was expected to serve breakfast to her in-laws at dawn. Her first act of wifely duty, a test of her grace, her skill, her obedience. You can almost picture your mother-in-law standing in the doorway, waiting to judge the meal before she judges you. Historians might debate whether these breakfasts were meant as welcome rituals or cruel tests, but you already know how they'll feel. Like another stage performance, another trial you didn't ask for. The bed creaks as you shift, the straw rustling under your weight. The room is dark except for the faint light from outside, and every creak of the house reminds you the village is waking somewhere out there. They're already talking, you can almost hear them. Did she do her duty? Is the miller's son pleased? Did she smile at breakfast or cry into her bread? If gossip were a harvest, you think, they're reaping a fine crop today. Your husband stirs beside you, rubbing at his eyes, the faint smear of flour still on his jaw from the day before. Morning already, he mutters, his voice rough with sleep. You nod, throat tight, your thoughts already racing ahead. To the well, to the market, to the eyes that will meet yours when you step outside this house. You're a wife now, and the village will never stop watching. You take a breath, steadying yourself, the straw rustling beneath you like a warning. The night may have been long, but the true test, the life that follows, is only just beginning. He doesn't say more, but his silence feels different now, less cold, less guarded. It's as if you're both bracing for the same storm, caught in a story neither of you wrote. You're meant to step out as a united couple, two halves of one life, but it feels more like being cast into a play without knowing your lines. The church says you are one flesh, yet the village wants proof, something tangible, something to whisper about, and you have no idea how to fake that. If marriage is a performance, you think you're both forgetting your cues. You lie there for a moment longer, the straw poking your back, the chill of the room clinging to your skin even beneath the scratchy blanket. That coarse, worn thing barely holds back the cold. The faint gray light seeping through the shutters grows stronger, signaling dawn outside. The world is waking, roosters crowing, a dog barking somewhere down the lane. The slow creak of cartwheels over frozen mud. Your husband sits up, rubbing his face, his jaw still smudged with flour from yesterday's feast. He mutters something about morning, voice thick with sleep, and the sound reminds you of everything that comes next, the part you've been dreading almost as much as last night. The village's scrutiny, the watchful eyes, the endless expectations. But beyond that, another reality is waiting, one that feels even heavier. Household duties. You're not just a bride anymore. You're the mistress of this house now, the miller's wife, and the tide of chores, responsibilities and unwritten rules is about to crash over you like a bucket of cold well water in medieval Europe. A wife was the backbone of the home, especially in families like yours, managing the hearth, spinning wool, cooking, cleaning, tending to livestock. All of it mattered just as much as your husband's work at the mill by the 14th century. A new bride was expected to dive in immediately, proving her worth not just to her husband's family, but to the entire village that helped tie your dowry meadow into his hands. You glance toward the hearth and spot it, the carved wooden spoon your mother-in-law left there last night, a household charm, supposedly to bring luck in your daily labors. The gesture might have been kind, but to you, it feels like a warning. Historians could debate whether these charms were tokens of support or reminders of duty, but as you stare at it, you can already tell which one it is. You shift, the straw crunching beneath you, and sit up. The blanket slides to your waist, and the cold air hits your skin like a slap. The room still smells faintly of smoke and old ale from the night before. You can hear footsteps outside, your mother-in-law's heavy stride, and you just know she's already awake, expecting you to stoke the fire, knead the dough, and somehow look like you know what you're doing. You think back to your own mother, her fussing before the wedding, her endless advice about posture, manners, and work. You see now what she was preparing you for. Not the ceremony, not the wedding night, but this, the life after, the daily proving of your worth. The village will be watching, same as always, waiting for the first slip. If running a household is an art, you think, you're still sketching stick figures. Your husband swings his legs off the bed and pulls on his boots. The frame creaks. He's quiet but no longer distant, and you wonder if he expects you to rise, to start boiling porridge and bustling about like the priest's picture of the perfect wife. You've done these tasks before. Helping your mother, milking cows, mending clothes, scrubbing floors, but it feels different now. This isn't her hearth, it's yours, and if the fire dies, if the bread burns, the village will know by noon. You glance at the wooden spoon again. The dawn light catches its carved handle, and for a moment it glints like a scepter, a symbol of responsibility you're not sure you're ready to hold. You stand, the floor icy under your bare feet, and pull your thin shift closer around you. The room's a mess, the cups from last night, a wilted flower from your wedding crown, a scattering of straw. You want to tidy it just to have something to do, to delay stepping outside into the eyes and whispers. The women at the well will be waiting. They'll watch your every move, from how you sweep the threshold to how you greet your husband's family. If you stumble, they'll notice if the hearth is cold or the bread too tough. The news will spread faster than smoke. If chores are a stage, you think, you're performing for the nosiest audience in Christendom. Your husband ties his belt and glances at you. You need help with the fire? He asks quietly. His voice is rough but not unkind. The question surprises you. The church had made it sound like he'd expect obedience, not offer help. You shake your head, murmuring, I'll manage, though you're not sure you will. The dowry, the vows, the ceremony. They've all led here, to this small smoky room where your worth will now be measured by a swept floor and a steady flame. If a clean house is salvation, you think, then you'll be praying for a miracle. You move to the hearth, the wooden spoon looming like a relic of your new station kneeling. You fumble with the flint and kindling, striking until a small spark catches. The fire crackles weakly to life, and you breathe out in relief as warmth seeps into your frozen fingers. But even as the flame grows, a darker thought flickers in your mind, the one you've been avoiding since last night pregnancy. The church calls it a blessing, but every woman you know carries a different truth. That childbirth is as close to death as life gets. You've seen it. You've helped your mother tend to neighbors, pale, shaking, bleeding, some who never woke again in medieval times. Childbirth claimed 1 in 5 women, no doctors, no safety. Only midwives and charms. They tied relics to thighs, whispered prayers to saints, burned herbs to ease the pain, though you doubt any of it truly worked. You've seen the fear in their eyes, the same fear that's coiling in your stomach now, if heirs are a gift. You think grimly you'd rather receive a basket of apples. Your husband stands behind you. Stretching, he glances at the fire. It's going, he says, almost a compliment. You nod, too preoccupied to answer. He feels the pressure to produce an heir too. But the risk, the danger, that will always be yours alone. The church might call childbirth your sacred duty, but to you it feels like a gamble with your life. You add another log to the fire, watching the smoke curl upward and blink as it stings your eyes. The warmth is small but real, a fragile comfort against the weight of everything waiting outside. You think of your cousin, the neighbor, the whispered warnings at the feast, the jokes about fruitful nights that weren't jokes at all. You know what the village expects now. The same thing the church demands. Obedience, endurance and airs. The bedchamber brightens with dawn. The house stirs. You breathe in the scent of smoke and straw. And steady yourself, the day has begun. Your first as a wife, a mistress of the hearth and a woman under watch. You kneel beside the fire, the wooden spoon resting nearby like both a charm and a chain, and tell yourself to keep it burning. He doesn't say more, but his silence feels different now, less hostile, more like two people bracing for the same storm you were meant to step out as a united couple. But you feel like strangers cast into a play with no lines. The church says you are one flesh now, but the village wants proof and you have no idea how to stage it. If marriage is a performance, you both keep missing your cues. For now, you lie still, the straw poking at your back, and brace yourself for the morning's sharpened eyes. Dawn light spills through the shutters. The room is cold, the scratchy blanket pulled tight, and the gray outside grows brighter. Roosters crow, carts creak, a dog barks. The village is waking. Your husband rubs his face, the flour still smudged along his jaw, and mutters something about mourning. The thought of the scrutiny you feared, the well gossip, the market whispers, feels closer than ever, but alongside that pressure is another truth arriving with the light. Household duties. You are no longer just a bride. You are the mistress of this miller's house, and the flood of chores is about to break over you in medieval life. A wife's work held the household together. Cooking, cleaning, spinning, mending. These were not small tasks, but the quiet engine of survival. By the 14th century, a new bride was expected to step straight into those duties and prove herself to family and neighbors. You glance at the carved wooden spoon your mother-in-law left on the hearth, a little charm, or perhaps a warning, its handle catching the dawn historians argue whether such tokens were help or reminder. You know what it feels like to you. Responsibility. You push aside the rumpled blanket and set your feet on the cold boards. The bedchamber smells of last night's smoke and the faint licorice of the posy beneath the straw cups, and a wilted flower lie where the night left them outside. You can already hear your mother-in-law clumping about, calling for water and muttering that the bread must be started. You try not to let your hands shake as you scoop coarse flour into a bowl. Your fingers feel clumsy, but you remember the way your mother taught you. Steady hands, a warm hearth, a neat hearthstone. She was preparing you for this life all along, not for the spectacle of the wedding, but for the long, small work after your husband ambles back from checking the mill. He asks if you need help with the fire, a gruff offer that surprises you, and you murmur you'll manage, though you're not certain the dowry, the vows, the bedding ceremony. Everything funnels into this day-to-day proving of worth. If a clean house was salvation, you think wryly you'll be praying for a miracle still. You kneel by the hearth, strike flint to kindling, and coax a weak flame into being. The small victory is a warmth against the weight of what's to come. Darker thought creeps in as the fire takes. Pregnancy. The church and the village both make fertility into a duty for peasant women. Children were not only blessing but labor and legacy, heirs to tend fields and secure a family's future. You have seen the cost. Women who never woke from labor. Neighbors who returned pale and broken from deliveries gone wrong by the 14th century. Childbirth was a real everyday danger. Some midwives tied relics at a mother's thigh or braided herbs into a posy. Whether these comforts helped, no one can know. You add another log, the smoke stinging your eyes, and pray quietly for anything that might keep you safe. The house feels smaller now, the walls closing in with the pressure of your husband's authority. The church taught that men were heads of households, and that teaching gives weight to his word here. Yet last night's mercy, his choice not to force what neither of you were ready for, offers a fragile hope. Maybe he too feels the village watching. Perhaps he is as trapped by expectation as you are if he is king at the table, you note. You both seem caught on the same chessboard. Your mother-in-law hovers and scolds gently about the bread you work. Hands learning rhythm, flour, water, knead. Fold the women of the village. Agnes, your mother, the older wives in the market, have left you small gifts of advice and a bundle tucked into your shift. Their voices, the practical wisdom they offered at feasts and wells, are a lifeline. Keep the hearth hot, they said. Don't argue in public. Whisper instead, learn to bend like the reed. Their counsel is practical, blunt, and somehow freeing. Within the strictures there is room to steer. The dough rises by the hearth while you think about love. Whether it might ever matter here, marriages were built for survival more often than for affection. Yet village songs and distant tales of courtly love have a way of seeding private hopes. You remember your husband's quiet remark last night, "This is a lot," and feel a small warmth at the honesty it isn't. Romance, not yet, but it is something steadier than the spectacle of the day before, perhaps love. Like good bread takes time and tending, you shape the loaf, your hands finding their rhythm outside. The morning bustle grows, neighbors haggling, children shrieking, carts rumbling. Your mother-in-law's voice drifts through the doorway, sharp and watchful. The thought of annulment, escaping this marriage and its dowry, meadow and church vows, feels like a distant, impossible dream. The ropes that tied families together are thick and tangled. Unpicking them would mean shame or worse. Still, the bread warms and rises, and with it a small steadiness rises in you. The carved spoon on the hearth seems less a scepter and more a tool you can learn to use. The bride's bundle at your waist, the herbs and thread tucked there, smells faint and familiar, a quiet oath of sisterhood from the women who went before you. Their counsel gives you a kind of armor, not confrontation, but craft. Not rebellion, but subtlety. Your husband returns, flour on his cheek and nods at the loaf. "Smells good," he says, not poetry, but not unkind. You nod back, and a tiny spark answers in your chest. If affection can grow here, it will do so slowly, like thawing snow under the first steady sun. The church, the dowry, the bedding ceremony built this union, but if anything tender grows within it, it will be by your hands and his, day by day. The house brightens as the shutters flood with light. You wipe flour from your palms and set the loaf to brown by the fire. The village will watch, judge, and gossip. That reality does not change, but inside the small circle around the hearth, beneath the carved spoon and the watchful beams, you feel a faint resolve gathering. There will be chores and children, risk and duty. But there is also the quiet possibility of shaping a life within the rules you were given. For now you tend the fire, fold the dough and let the morning into the room. The future presses close, and you breathe, steadying yourself for the long work ahead, the slow, ordinary labor that will define your days and perhaps, in time, bring something like companionship. Annulment was a rare and thorny path, especially for peasants like you, whose marriages were built on practical needs and sacred oaths. By the 14th century, the church allowed annulments only under very specific conditions, non-consummation, fraud, or pre-existing vows. But for ordinary people, the process was costly, tangled in church law, and closely scrutinized. It left most women with no real escape. Some desperate brides even claimed bewitchment to void their marriages, blaming spells for their husband's failure in bed. The priests rarely believed such tales, but they lingered as whispers of both superstition and clever defiance. Historians still debate whether these claims were born from genuine belief or quiet rebellion. As you sit by the fire, poking at the glowing embers, your thoughts circle that same question: is there any way out? The heat stings your knuckles, and your eyes drift to the bedchamber door where your husband's boots last thudded. His mercy last night, sparing you the marriage debt, was a small kindness, but it left your union unsealed. Technically, that meant the marriage wasn't fully bound, a fragile loophole, perhaps. But even as you think it, you know what that would mean: scandal, disgrace, and your family's shame. Non-consummation wasn't just a sin against the church. It was an insult to the village's expectations. You'd be branded the girl who failed her duty, sent back to your parents' cottage as a burden if annulment were a key. It would be locked away in a chest you'd never open. You turned to the loaf resting near the hearth, its surface tight and ready for the fire's embrace, kneading it one last time. You sink your hands into its warmth and feel the weight of the church's rules pressing down on you. Once you said "I do," backed by that dowry and those vows, there was no turning back. You've heard stories of noble women buying annulments with gold. But for you, A peasant with nothing but a few chickens and a patch of earth. That's a fantasy. You remember your mother's words, bend like a reed. Only now do you understand she was preparing you for a life without escape. Even if your husband turned cruel, the village and church would tell you to endure, not to run. The thought makes you pause. Flour dusting your shift like snow, the bedchamber grows brighter as dawn filters through the shutters. Outside, your mother-in-law's sharp voice cuts through the air, barking orders for wood. You dread her return, her eyes always searching your face and your bread for signs of womanly success or failure. Annulment might sound like freedom, but it would only trade one prison for another. You'd lose your place, your family's honor, and whatever fragile footing you've gained here. You remember Agnes's warning to whisper your way with your husband, and realize that negotiation, not escape, might be the only path left if annulment were a road. It'd be blocked by the whole village and their pitchforks. Your husband's quiet, "We don't have to," still echoes in your mind. His restraint is a gift, but a dangerous one if word spread that the marriage went unsealed. Tongues would wag, the priest might come asking questions, and your mother-in-law would never let you forget it. You slide the loaf into the embers, its heat searing your fingers, and feel the weight of a life already set in motion. The dowry, the vows, the church's grip. There's no undoing it now if marriage is a cage. You're learning to decorate it, not break it. You watch the bread rise, the time-scented air steadying your nerves. The day awaits, heavy with chores and expectations. Freedom feels like a dream you can't afford to chase. The loaf's crust turns golden in the fire's glow, filling the room with warmth and the faintest comfort around you. The simple things, the carved wooden spoon by the hearth, the time in your bridal bundle, become small talismans against despair. Annulment may be impossible, but faith still offers a thread to cling to. The same church that binds you also gives you prayers to endure in this world of fields and firewood. Faith isn't just belief, it's survival in medieval Europe. It was the heartbeat of life itself, shaping every joy and sorrow, every birth and vow. Some wives carried prayer cords in their aprons, beads to count their devotions and keep their homes harmonious. Maybe your mother still clutches hers, whispering prayers for you now. The fire crackles as you shift the loaf, its scent filling the room. You think back to the wedding day, the priest's voice, the holy water, the vows that sealed your fate. Faith carried you through then, and now it's the only shield you have, against gossip, against judgment, against the fear of what's to come. If prayers could fix marriages, you'd be chanting until next harvest outside. Your mother-in-law's voice rises again, arguing about a stray goat. Patience, Faith says, but patience feels like another word for surrender. Still, the church promises reward for obedience. Maybe not in this life, but in the next. You glance at the iron ring on your finger, cold and unyielding, and wonder if faith can soften a cage. Your husband's quiet kindness last night feels like a small answer, a sign that mercy still lives in this house. You pull the loaf from the fire, its crust crisp and golden, setting it on the hearth. You feel a flicker of pride. Faith got you through this task. At least you whisper another prayer, not for rain or harvest this time, but for courage, for a spark of warmth in the life ahead. If God's listening, he must have a long list from this village. Your husband's boots thud outside, and you tense. Faith tells you to trust in his plan, even when that plan includes a stranger in your bed and a world that will never stop watching. You glance at the cross above the bed, the prayer cord tucked by the window, and realize these rituals are more than duties. They're lifelines, small bridges between fear and hope. If faith moves mountains, you'd settle for it moving a hill or two in this marriage. You wrap the loaf in cloth, the thyme scent soothing you, and draw a deep breath as the fire fades. The morning bustle grows outside, voices rising, life pressing forward. The golden loaf cools beside the carved spoon, a quiet reminder of what endurance looks like. But as your thoughts drift, something softer stirs. The old stories the women tell by candlelight, tales of charms and spirits, whispered where the church's reach thins folklore. The peasant's quiet rebellion. These tales fill the cracks where faith and duty leave emptiness in your world. They're not just stories. They're ways of making sense of love and luck, of binding fear to meaning. Some say a bride should sleep with a sprig of hazel under her pillow to dream of her husband's true heart. Your mother pressed one into your hand at the feast, but it was lost in the bedding chaos. Maybe that's just as well. Historians can argue all they want about whether such beliefs were nonsense or defiance. But you know they were hope. Plain and simple, and hope, even here in this quiet room, is something you're not ready to give up. As you sweep the ashes from the hearth, you find yourself wondering what truths hide in the old tales. The embers still glow faintly beneath the gray dust, and you pause for a moment, the broom's bristles scraping softly against the floorboards. Your thoughts drift back to the bedding ceremony, the chanting voices, the laughter that carried an edge of something older. Stranger beneath the songs and blessings, there had been whispers of spirits, of unseen eyes watching from the corners, blessing or cursing the bed. You remember Agnes, the bent old neighbor, telling you once about a bride who forgot to leave milk out for the good folk and woke to a soured marriage. You'd laughed at the story then, but now, in the quiet of the bedchamber, part of you wonders if there's some truth in it. You glance toward the corners, half expecting to see a flicker of movement in the shadows. If fairies ruin marriages, you think wryly, they're worse gossips than the village women. These stories feel alive in you now, their strange magic offering something the church never could. A softer kind of hope you look toward. The door where your husband's boots last sounded, and wonder if he believes in any of this. The men at the mill surely share their own tales, of bewitched wives, of enchanted crops that flourished after a whispered charm. You think about the hazel sprig your mother pressed into your palm, the fertility posy she tied with a red ribbon. Faith and folklore tangled together in one quiet act of protection. Her voice echoes in your mind. Mind the old ways, even as you pray. And suddenly, you realize she's always walked both paths, trusting in God, but also in the unseen. You remember the women's stories of brides who tied knots in moonlight to win affection, or those who lost love by spilling salt before the wedding. Folklore, you realize, is like a secret map, if only you could learn to read it. You set the broom aside, the hearth clean now, and feel a small shiver that isn't just from the cold morning light streams through the shutters. Pale and clear, and from outside you hear your mother-in-law's sharp voice scolding a child. Folklore says women, like her, the meddling kind, might be changelings in disguise. The thought makes you smirk despite yourself. You think of your husband, of his gentleness last night, and wonder if some charm could explain his kindness or warn you of his temper to come. The church calls love a duty, something to be upheld, but folklore whispers it's a spell, delicate and easily broken. If love's a charm, you hope it's one that doesn't backfire. You touch the sprig of thyme tucked inside your shift, its scent grounding you, and feel the pull of all those stories, the ones that promise more than mere obedience. The loaf you baked crackles as it cools, the wooden spoon resting beside it like a silent witness to the small rituals that fill your life. You think of your dowry, your vows, the village's watchful eyes, all of it woven with threads of superstition and faith. Spirits in the fields, omens in the stars, charms in the hearth ash. For women like you, folklore isn't just fancy talk, it's survival, way to shape meaning in a life you didn't choose. You smile at the thought of the old tale, the miller's wife who outwitted a fairy and won a golden heart. If folklore's true, you think maybe you could strike a bargain of your own for now. You step toward the door, the thyme scent steadying your breath. The day awaits. You carry the village's stories with you, like quiet armor, fragile but real, against whatever comes next. You pause at the doorway, the dying hearth behind you, the golden loaf cooling on its cloth beside the carved wooden spoon, the straw mattress in the corner, with its scratchy blanket and tangled sheets, feels like the ghost of last night's chaos. The thin shift clings to your flour-dusted skin, and the faint scent of thyme still lingers from your bridal bundle. It mingles with the memory of the village women's tales, of hazel sprigs and fairy blessings, the little magics that once gave this marriage a shimmer of hope. But as the morning bustle grows outside, a heavier thought settles over you. Legacy. This marriage, this bond sealed by dowry and prayer, isn't just about you or your husband. It's about the line you're meant to carry forward, the family's future balanced on your shoulders in medieval Europe. Legacy was everything. For peasants like you, children weren't just blessings. They were survival itself. Hands to work the fields, heirs to keep the mill turning, names to keep the family remembered by the 14th century. Both church and village watched closely for those heirs, tying your worth to the life you could bring into the world. Some families even hung a lineage cloth above the hearth, a woven record of ancestors and births. Your mother-in-law has one. Its faded threads glaring down at you from the wall. Historians might call it pride, but you can feel the weight of expectation stitched into every name. You rest your hand against the door's rough wood, the morning light spilling in behind you. The loaf sits on the hearth, its crust golden, a small triumph in a world that asks too much. The village women's tales spoke of weaving love under moonlight. But legacy isn't born from hope, it's a demand. A relentless one. You think back to the bedding ceremony, the chants for heirs echoing through the night. They weren't just blessings for fertility. They were commands, reminders that this marriage is more than a bond between two people. It's a contract between families, a link in the village's endless chain. Your husband's mercy last night, his quiet, "We don't have to," spared you the pain of obligation, but it also delayed the legacy everyone's waiting for. And that delay has its own dangers. If legacy's a chain, you're already tangled in its links. You check the loaf again. Its warmth fading, your mother's voice returns to you. Her advice to bend like a reed she'd spoken of her own mother, who bore 7 children and buried 4, all to keep the family name alive. Legacy isn't just about children. You realize it's about stories, land, and labor, the mill's endless grind that now includes you. You think of your husband's flour-smudged face and wonder if he feels this pressure. Too, he's the miller's son, bound to carry the trade, the house, the pride. The church calls it your duty to help him, but if you fail, it's you the village will blame. You touch the time again. It's sent a faint shield against the weight pressing down on your chest. A breeze slips through the crack in the door, and from outside comes your mother-in-law's sharp voice. A command, a scolding, a reminder that this world keeps turning whether you're ready or not. The lineage cloth looms behind you, each name a ghost expecting you to deliver another. You think about the dowry, the vows, the folklore, all threads leading to the same truth. A child, a name, a future. The thought of childbirth, its blood, its risk, tightens your breath. But legacy adds another kind of fear, one that binds your body to the village's history. If heirs are history, you're writing it with a quill you didn't choose. Your husband's boots crunch outside, and you freeze. But the sound drifts away. Maybe he's gone back to the mill. You think of his quiet gestures, his nod at your bread, his offer to help with the fire, and wonder if legacy could become something shared, a purpose that softens the space between you. The women say love's a slow spark, but legacy burns colder. It's a fire meant for those not yet born. You wrap the loaf tighter, the wooden spoon standing nearby like a small token of victory. If legacy's a tapestry, you're weaving it with threads you can't yet see for now. You linger by the hearth. The time's scent steadies you. You brace for the day ahead, for the stairs. The questions, the hopes you didn't ask to carry the embers fade to gray. The bread cools on its cloth, and you stand between the ghosts of the past and the weight of the future. A single thread in the village's long, unbroken weave, but now, as the noise of morning rises outside, carts creaking, voices calling, roosters crowing, you find yourself settling into a new mindset. Survival. This marriage, with its dowry meadow, church vows, and village stairs, is a harsh reality, but you're learning to adapt, to find your place in its unforgiving rhythm in medieval Europe. Survival was the steady heartbeat of peasant life, especially for new wives like you, women charged with managing the hearth, navigating husbands, enduring childbirth. Every day was a quiet battle against scarcity and judgment. By the 14th century, women had become masters of resilience, balancing church rules, village gossip, and endless chores to keep their families afloat. There's an odd little custom, one you cling to now, the survival knot, a small cord tied with prayers or charms. Tucked into a sleeve or shift for strength, your mother tied one for you, whispering her favorite saying. Bend like a reed. As she slipped it beside the sprig of thyme in your wedding bundle, historians still argue about those knots. Were they charms, or just symbols of sheer grit? It doesn't matter as you sweep the hearth's ashes. You hold fast to its promise of endurance. The fire's almost out. You poke the embers, the wooden spoon beside you like a silent ally. You think back to the bedding ceremony, the laughter of the village, the weight of expectation. You realize survival isn't just about producing heirs or baking bread. It's about outlasting scrutiny, fear, and the endless judgment that hangs in the air. Your husband's mercy last night, his quiet, "We don't have to," was a lifeline. But so is your own resolve. You think of women like Agnes, laughing through hardship, or your mother, haggling for the last turnip at market. Their strength is your blueprint. Joke number 1. If survival's a game, you're learning the rules faster than a fox in a henhouse. You glance toward the door, where your mother-in-law's voice cuts through the morning, scolding a neighbor's child. Her judgment, your bread, your chores, they all loom large. Yet you're starting to see it differently now, not as a sentence, but a challenge. The vows, the dowry, the folklore, they've all shaped this marriage. But survival means carving your own path within it. You think of your husband again, his gruff kindness, his nod at your loaf, and wonder if he's learning. 2, he's the miller's son, bound by his own duties, his own expectations. Maybe both of you are finding your rhythm. Step by careful step, you tighten the survival knot at your side. It's a small act of defiance, but it's yours. The morning sun floods through the shutters, and the village hum swells, carts rumbling, chickens clucking, voices weaving together in a familiar chaos. You remember the women's advice, the prayer cords, the lineage cloths, the whispered blessings, tools for surviving this world. Your fear of childbirth, your dread of gossip, they're still there, but you're building your armor, piece by piece. You've baked bread, faced the hearth, endured the night's quiet victories, small, but steady, stacking like stones in a wall. Joke number 2. If life's a storm, you're not building an ark, but you've got a sturdy umbrella. You lift the loaf, its weight solid and warm in your hands, and feel a flicker of pride. Your husband's boots crunch outside. You pause, bracing for his return, or your mother-in-law's next demand. Either way, you're ready. Survival isn't rebellion, it's endurance quiet. Steady grit, the knot, the time, the women's tales. They form an invisible net, holding you when you falter. This marriage isn't what you dreamed, but it's what you've got, and you're learning to stand in it. Joke number 3. If survival's an art, you're painting with whatever colors you can find. You set down the loaf, the spoon gleaming in the light, and step toward the door. The hearth glows faintly behind you, a symbol of your persistence. The bread, your first victory, the straw mattress, a shadow of last night's uncertainty. The scent of time lingers, grounding you as you brace for the day ahead. Outside, the village calls, chatter, clatter, chickens, but you pause, just for a breath. This marriage, with its meadow dowry, its vows, its relentless pressure, has reshaped you, and somehow, you're finding your place in it, one quiet moment at a time. In medieval Europe, reflection wasn't common for peasants like you. Life was labor, through and through, but in these rare, still moments, by the hearth, or under the stars, you make sense of it all. Women like you bore the weight of faith, family, and community, drawing strength from simple acts, baking bread, tying prayer knots, whispering small vows to the fire, a quirky tidbit. Some wives marked their first day of marriage with a hearth vow, a silent promise to endure. You never spoke the words aloud, but as you glance at your loaf, it feels like one all the same. Historians debate whether these vows were real or imagined, but as your hand rests on the door, you make your own silent pledge. Keep going. The sunlight spills across the room, catching on the loaf, the spoon, the rumpled bed. You think of last night, your husband's mercy, the village's stairs, the church's rules, and see it all as part of one vast tapestry, woven with fear, duty, and a glimmer of hope. Agnes's laughter, your mother's reed wisdom, they echo softly in your mind. You're not just surviving anymore, you're starting to stand taller. Your husband's nod at your bread hints at something more, a partnership. Fragile but growing. Joke number 1. If marriage is a field, you're planting with cautious hands. You rest your palm on the door's rough wood, the scent of thyme mixing with the faint licorice of the fertility posy under the bed. Outside waits your mother-in-law's sharp tongue, the gossip at the well, the grinding of the mill. But you're not the same girl who hauled water 2 days ago. You've faced the bedding ceremony, the hearth, the weight of legacy, and come out stronger. Faith, folklore, the whispers of women. They've shaped this moment, where you finally claim your place not as a pawn, but as a woman with her own quiet spark. You think of the dowry, the vows, the survival knot, and feel them merge into something solid. Like the loaf you baked, the door creaks as you push it open. The village wakes, children laughing, a dog barking, your mother-in-law's voice cutting through the air. You step onto the threshold, sunlight warm on your face. This is your world now. The miller's house, the village eyes, a husband you're learning to know. You're not free, not yet, but you're learning how to bend without breaking, how to endure, maybe even thrive. Joke number 2. If life's a loom, you're weaving a pattern nobody else can see. You take a slow breath, the thyme scent grounding you, and step outside with quiet resolve. The rhythm of the village pulls you forward, the grind of the mill, the call of the women, the hum of daily life. You think of your hearth vow, your promise to yourself, and carry it like a glowing ember. This marriage, this life, it's yours to navigate. Thorns and all, you glance back once more at the hearth, that small symbol of victory, and smile faintly. Joke number 3. If survival's a song, you're humming the first verse. The village stretches before you, alive and unyielding, but you're ready to walk its paths, to meet its gaze one step at a time. As the village hum softens, your breath eases. The sun climbs higher, spilling gold across thatched roofs and dusty paths where children chase stray chickens. You walk on, your shift brushing your legs, the thyme scent trailing behind like a whisper. The mill's steady grind hums in the distance, the world's heartbeat steadying your own. The loaf you left on the hearth, a quiet promise kept, feels like proof that you're finding your footing. The villager's eyes are still there, but softer now, blurred by morning light. Let your shoulders relax. Let your worries drift like smoke from the dying fire. You're here, in this moment, and that's enough. Close your eyes. Feel the rhythm of the mill, the warmth of the sun, and sink into the peace between breaths, where dreams weave gently into the day. First light. Sleep now. Sweet listener, wrapped in the village's hum, safe in its embrace. Sweet dreams. You step out into the sun, and the village meets you like an old, complicated friend, warm, loud, and not altogether forgiving. The path from the miller's doorway is a ribbon of packed dirt flanked by low hedges and the lean backs of cottages. Children tumble like bright leaves across it. The mill's wheel calls in a steady, watery rhythm, and somewhere a dog announces its ownership of the morning. You take the first few steps as if testing the world's weight, and it answers with the small, constant pressure of expectation. Yet beneath that pressure is something else, possibility, brittle and new. Like the thin crust of a loaf fresh from the oven, people notice you, faces turn. Some familiar, some not. There's a brief, assessing blink the village has for everyone. Is she harmless, useful, interesting, or a problem? You meet the eyes you can meet with a calm that surprises you. Agnes, who laughed through winter and spit in the mud when a man boasted too loudly, tips her head and gives you a look that contains a full conversation of solidarity. Old Merrick, blackened hands from the smithy, nods once. A rough benediction. Children sniff like small animals, picking up on newness. Your mother-in-law's gaze is a constant, a saw edge behind her words. But when she sees the loaf in your hand and the way your husband, broad-shouldered, still sleeps soft in the mornings, gives you the smallest of nods, there is a shift, tiny and telling. You walk toward the commons because that is where life gathers. The well is already a hub. Women comparing yesterday's gossip to the hour's news. A boy with a stubborn goat. A man with flour already smudging his face. You find a place to stand and slide your hand to the knot at your hip, as if to reassure yourself that it's there. It is. The cord's warmth is the warmth of a memory. of your mother's hands, and her simple, fierce counsel bend like a reed bend. And you will not break. Agnes moves close and takes your loaf as if it were an offering. She squeezes your fingers. Quick and game, you did well, she says. She doesn't elaborate with kindness. She never does. But the sound is enough word. We'll spread of your bread before the sun has climbed high. Bread in a village is a signal. It tells you about skill, about patience, about whether this household can keep a man fed through a lean week. You find your chest loosening. A small release that tastes like victory. Your husband's work at the mill defines him and, in some ways, defines you now. The mill is where grain becomes grain again. Where the dull thump of stone grinds into potential, it will be his day. Labor in a wheel of duties you do not yet fully see. You will learn it. The times to bring bread, the times to fetch, the barter steps, the slip of a coin across a palm. There is comfort in routine. There is danger, too. For routine can be the place where small injustices calcify into hard fact. The day unfolds in small ceremonies. You barter a wash of linens for a handful of salt. You trade a bowl of porridge for news of who has a fever. You help an old woman with her basket in exchange for salted herrings that will keep for days. Each transaction is its own quiet negotiation. Each kindness a deposit into some invisible account. The village runs on favors and memories. You are learning its economy of grace. The hardest moments come in the gaps between tasks, where your mind finds room to wander, and the old anxieties move in like foxes. Childbirth sits as a shadow in your ribs. You feel its presence like a steady throb. A long and certain hurt you have not yet met. Women around you carry the same knowledge in different shapes. Some have scars. Some have children clutching at skirts. Some have fingers that remember pain like a scripture. You think of the midwife, an older woman named Hilda, who keeps herbs and stories tucked behind the bristled shelf of her cottage. Hilda's house smells of rue and thyme and the sour sweet of fermenting things. She will be the first person you will seek should the day of travail come. Until then, you study the midwives' faces in the market and learn to read the language of chords and chants. You also begin to see the shape of power in the village. It is not all in the church, though Father Barrow's thin voice controls more than you would expect. It is woven through the market. The gossip at the well, the ways that favors are called in like debts. Your mother-in-law knows how to call in those favors. The way she stands at the hearth, how she names debts. It is her currency. Her voice can make a neighbor shuffle or grow meek watching her. You learn to keep a ledger inside you. Who owes kindness, who steals time, who remembers your family's name with warmth. This is useful information. You gather it like stones, smooth and small, to build your wall at night. The village takes on a different face. Candles are sparse, and shadows grow long in the corners of houses. You lie awake sometimes, the thin straw mattress pressing to the bones of your hips, and listen to the rhythm of the mill in the distance, steady and sure as a heartbeat. Your husband sleeps more lightly than you think. Once, in the hush between midnight and morning, he reached for you and trembled with a simple, soft fear, less about the world's hard edges and more about the idea of parenthood and whether he could be a good man under the village's eyes. You felt his hand, rough with flour, and your own worry eased a fraction. He is both a partner and another person figuring his way. There are smaller, private rights that begin to mark you. A neighbor shows you how to mend a shift with a seam that will not gape. You learn the particular fold of a bandage that will not slip when you move about with goods. An elder teaches you the mixture of lard and ash that cleans wooden spoons when no soap is present. These lessons are practical, but they hold something else. The sense that belonging is built by hands. Each stitch is a signpost. Each shared secret of hearth and need lets you feel the world tilt closer to you. And then there are moments when the village's edge presses against something wild in you one afternoon. As you walk along the path that skirts the stream, you spot a boy crouched beneath an ash tree. He is carving. A tiny wooden soldier with a broken knife. His tongue pokes out of his lips in concentration. You sit beside him and watch the curl of wood fall away. He tells you his name. Tomas. He says his father is away at the fair, and he is making the soldier so that his mother will smile. There is a sweetness in that, and you feel its sting. You remember the light in your own mother's eyes when you returned home with a new ribbon. There are, you think, Reserves of tenderness, both small and fierce in this village. The kind that can keep a family together through a hard winter. You find yourself drawn into the village's stories. The ones that crackle at the edges of the commonplace, Agnes tells you. Over a cup of Waterdale, of the night when the miller's wheel stopped for no human reason, only to begin again when 3 women walked to the stream and threw in a pinch of rosemary. A small, joking, superstitious act that suddenly felt like an incantation. Old Merrick swears that once, a lost traveler came to the well and left a carved stone that hummed once under the moon. These are tales with teeth. They tell of things outside the church's tidy book. Small miracles and crooked fortunes that don't need a priest's approval. They ripple through you and settle. You buy into them not because you believe everything, but because they provide scaffolding. They make the unknown feel less hostile. You begin to carry your own talismans, a scrap of cloth with a stitch you made when you felt afraid, the survival knot at your waist, a sprig of thyme tucked in the bread box. Each token is a marker. I was here. I tried. I kept something precious, the world around you. With its mills and market and gossip grows less like a test and more like a canvas you might color, and yet the village keeps its sharper edges. There are whispers about your dowry, about whether the miller's son will make of you what your parents hoped. There are glances that thread between curiosity and calculation. Who will inherit what? Who will trade what? For what? You notice it in the way men hover at the edge of conversations, and in how women assess the seams of each other's sleeves. You learn quickly that public opinion in a village can be as punishing as any winter, but you also see how readily it can be softened. A well-placed loaf, a favor at the right time, and people's tongues can be loosened or quieted. One afternoon brings something less ordinary than gossip. A messenger arrives from a nearby manor, dispatched by a squire who works for Lord Redmayne, the noble whose lands reach nearly to your village's furthest field. He brings the sort of summons that makes shoulders tighten. A requirement for extra grain to be delivered. There is no malice in the squire's voice, only the flat efficiency of a man transacting duty. Still, the request will mean harder days for many families. Your husband mutters about the mill's stores and the way the winter will pinch the village, which had been soft with light, sharpens you feel the old reeds bending again, now by the sleeker wind of authority. This is where your newfound bargaining skills become necessary. You stand with other women at the meeting by the green. A circle of hands and knitted brows, plans are made. A rota for deliveries, a pooling of stores in case of shortage. Some men want to make a stand. To refuse others, say it is better to keep heads low and pay the inevitable price. You learn that survival demands both courage and cunning. To resist outright might invite worse reprisals. To comply without protest might starve your family. There are no easy answers. The choice lands on you like a stone that night. By lamplight, you and your husband speak in low sentences. He looks at you not as someone to be told the solution, but as someone whose mind can weigh the facts. This is a new thing, being consulted. It is a small grace that ripples further. You suggest a compromise you have seen in another village. Pooled resources, a shared watch to prevent theft, and a plan to appeal politely to the squire for a deferment. He nods, relief and fear crossing his face in the same breath. For the first time since the dowry was counted and the vows were said, you feel the mesh of partnership expand in a tangible way. You are not naive to joy. Hilda reminds you one evening over a bowl of nettle broth that hardship often comes in waves. You will be sailed over. As will we all, she says, dropping a leaf into her cup as if it were a soldier into warfare. But know the caps and troughs they teach you craft. She speaks like someone who has been lashed by winter and come through with song. You take her words like a map, not a promise of easy days, but a chart of resilience. There is a season of small victories that follows the squire, persuaded by a well-placed letter and the show of communal responsibility. Delays the largest of his demands. It is not a triumph. There are still shortages and hard evenings, but for that moment, the village breathes. The mill grinds at a slower, kinder rhythm, and for a few weeks, there is enough you stand at the window of your cottage and watch the moon on the wheel's rim and feel a steady, aching pride. You are beginning to see how influence is made, through steadiness, through the patience of repeated small acts rather than a single grand declaration. Love, too, unwraps itself slowly. It is not the bright, sudden thing of tales and theater. It is measured in shared chores and the way your husband rests his head against the kitchen wall after the day's labor is done. It is the tenderness in his hands when he lifts a sleeping child, if a child should come, and the way his eyes hold no triumph but a cautious wonder. You catch him sometimes watching you as you work the dough and see in that look a complicated gratitude that you are partners in a life that is dangerous and radiant in equal measure. But the village will not permit you long moments of complacency. Winter arrives with a sharpness that makes the mill wheel creak like a weary animal. A fever goes through one family on the lane. Swift and cruel Hilda, worn thin, visits night after night with poultices and chants. You find yourself bottling mead and bringing it to the bedside. Hands steady, though your heart is loud. The survival knot at your waist feels heavier. You think of prayer knots and hearth vows and all the small rituals that steady a person. They are not superstition, really, you decide, but practice in staying human. One night, returning from a round of water and soup, you see smoke curling from a cottage at the edge of the village. It is thin, not like the great hungry flames of a house in full blaze. But it is there people gather, murmuring. A crowd pressed to the edges like a tide. The mother of the house stands at her doorway, face illuminated by flame and fear. The child still inside, clutching a rag doll. There is a moment when instinct and will meet. Men move to the door. Women form a chain for buckets. Hilda calls out medical needs. You feel an old, deep muscle of action pull you forward. The loaf at your side seems suddenly, absurdly irrelevant. You are not the woman who fled the first night. You have practiced endurance. You step into the line of buckets, the water cold like truth, and you throw yourself at the work. The fire is contained. The child coughs and is soot dark but alive, and the cottage's owner collapses into a heap of tears that smell of smoke and relief. The village hum changes then. Strangers pass out warm blankets. The smith offers a patch of iron. Someone produces a spare blanket. It is in chaos that the village's soft heart reveals itself. You stand there, throat tight, hands shaking from water and heat, and you feel very small and very large all at once. Your husband reaches out and takes your hand, and you squeeze his fingers until you can feel the quickness of his pulse. Together, you and the village have held something fragile in the weeks that follow. The village talks more kindly of you. Small deeds make reputations. People come to your door for advice or for loaves, and you give them what you can because giving is a way to make a place safer. For others, yes, but for yourself too, you are learning the moral geometry of communal life. You are learning that survival is often collective. The survival knot at your waist becomes less a private charm than a symbol people recognize. Sometimes a child will tug at it, and you will tell her the story of its making, how your mother's hands tied it, and how its strength felt like a promise. Children like promises, and yet, the world keeps delivering its tests. A trader from the north stops in with exotic wares and news of a pestilence in a neighboring shire. Farmers worry about the coming sowing. A deputation from a rival. Village looks in on the mill's market with an appetite for trade and competition. Each new arrival brings shifting currents. You learn the art of patience, again and again, of waiting, of watching the faces that hold the truth, and of timing your own moves when the moment is right. In the evenings, when household tasks are done and the fire sputters low, you sit with Hilda or Agnes and listen to stories that loop the past into present. They tell of a woman who once refused a lord and lived to laugh at him later, of a friend who buried a secret in the hollow of an old elm and found it preserved like a relic decades later. These are tales that teach cunning and kindness in equal measure. You tuck them into your mind like seeds to be planted one dusk. As you stand by the mill's sluice, watching water turn to shadow, a stranger arrives. He is not like the usual traders. His cloak is plain, but his face carries the kind of weary clarity that speaks of long roads and many judgments made on the fly. He asks, not obnoxiously but with directness, about the mill and its owner. He seems to be gathering details like a spider spins thread. The villagers watch him with polite curiosity. You meet him by accident, carrying a bucket of grain. He looks at you as if he recognizes something familiar. Not your name, but the shape of your resolve. I seek someone who knows this place, he says. Someone who knows, who keeps the village's secret path. It is the sort of question that could mean anything. You feel a shift, a current in the air, a secret path. The phrase lingers in your mind like a stone dropped in a well. You have seen no sign of anything beyond the usual networks of kindness and necessity. But the word opens your curiosity. The stranger smiles faintly and asks whether there might be someone in the village who remembers the old boundaries, the places where the bones of previous lives lay true. You realize you are listening as if the answer matters more than you would have believed. Your husband returns that evening, and there is a new look between you both. One of alertness, of mutual inquiry. That night, you tie the survival knot a little tighter and look at the moon. The stranger, as question coils in your thoughts like a vine secrets have, a way of pulling at a place until the place reveals them, or destroys those who pry outside. The mill's slow grind is a metronome. Inside, your hands fold dough. Your fingers find the old rhythm. You have learned endurance. You have learned to build small citadels of warmth inside a harsh world. You have also learned curiosity's dangerous sweetness. You will sleep, then rise, and the village will go on. But the stranger's question stays, and it carries with it the promise of a path you have not yet walked. You make yourself a promise. Small, like the ones you have been learning to keep. You will look into this matter quietly. You will ask Hilda about old boundaries. You will listen to the whispered lore at the well. You will watch the stranger when he walks the lane. You will not leap into peril. You will gather facts like bread, slowly, bread by bread, until you can feed the truth to your mind without fear. There are seasons where such a promise is all a person needs to feel that they are forward moving. It steadies you. The knot at your waist sits like a small compass. The village hum continues. Carts, children's calls. The mill's two-toned moan. Your hands are in flour and dough. Your heart is in a new place where survival is not just endurance but possibility. You do not know yet whether the stranger brings danger or deliverance. You only know that his presence has shifted the small gravity of your world. You breathe in the smoke-sweet air of evening. Let the last light slide across the loaf you have placed by the window. The village, with all its faults and mercies, holds its breath with you. Tomorrow you will begin to follow threads. Questions at the market, an inquiry of Hilda, a careful talk with Agnes. You will not rush. You will not declare. You will listen. So you close the cottage door and set your hand on the latch. The sound like a small, final note outside beyond the threshold. The world keeps moving, and somewhere in its fold, a secret stirs, promising to pull you further along the path you have only just begun to walk. You step into the night, into the story's shadow, into what comes next. The morning after the stranger's arrival feels different. The air is sharp, clean, touched by frost. Even the chickens move slower, as though the village itself is holding its breath. You wake before the bell, your shift still warm from sleep, and watch the first line of sunlight cross the floorboards. The mill's hum begins soon after, steady as ever. But today, even that familiar sound carries something taut beneath it. You move through your chores almost by instinct, stoking the hearth, kneading the dough, folding the cloths still damp from washing, but your thoughts wander, circling the stranger's words like a hawk tracing its prey. Someone who knows the village's secret paths. You remember your mother's warnings about curiosity, how it can be both candle and wildfire. Still, you can't leave it alone. There's something in that question that feels meant for you, as if it recognized the new steel in your spine, the quiet determination you've been forging since that first morning as a wife. When you reach the well, Agnes is already there, her hands red from the cold. She squints at you through a puff of breath. You heard about the man then? She says. You nod. He asked about old paths. Agnes makes a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. There are always old paths. Most are just brambles now. Some should stay that way. You draw water in silence for a moment before asking, You ever hear of one near the mill? Agnes tilts her head, studying you. You're not thinking of going wandering alone, are you? The woods are trickier than they look, and the miller's wife has enough to do without chasing ghosts. Her teasing is gentle, but her eyes are serious. You smile faintly and say, Just curious. Curious it's not a lie. But it isn't the whole truth either. Later that day you take a longer route home, one that skirts the stream and dips behind the mill's back wall. There, You notice what you've never truly seen before. A faint trail, half swallowed by moss and roots, leading into the trees. A relic of something older, maybe forgotten. You kneel and touch the earth, it's packed firm beneath the frost. But the shape is clear, a man-made path. Once you hear footsteps behind you. The stranger, he stops a few paces away. The soft rasp of his cloak against bark, the only sound. You found it, he says quietly. I wondered if anyone here still could. You straighten slowly. What is it? He hesitates, then says, an old boundary road before the Lord's father claimed these lands. It marked a safe route, one that led between manors. It was buried after the last famine. When villages closed themselves off, you study his face. Why dig it up now? Because famine may return, he says. And roads like this, they're lifelines. For trade, for news, for escape. If it comes to that, escape. The word lands in you like a spark. You think of the squire's demands, the lean harvest, the way the world presses on those who have the least to give. He looks at you as though weighing your silence. You've seen how the people look to you. He says, you could help open it again. You don't answer, not yet, but you feel something shift, something larger than fear or duty, the sense of a choice that night. When your husband returns from the mill, his hands dusted white and his hair streaked with flour, you tell him everything. He listens in the quiet way he has, gaze fixed on the fire when you finish. He takes a long breath. If the road's real, he says, it could save us one day, or damn us. If the Lord finds out, you nod, it's both, isn't it? Like everything worth doing. He gives a low chuckle. You sound like Hilda. You smile. Maybe I'm becoming her. The next few days pass in a hush of secrets. You and your husband walk the path at dusk. Clearing roots, marking stones, Hilda helps in her quiet way, bringing herbs to ease your sore hands and murmuring old blessings that sound half like prayers. Half like rebellion, Agnes pretends not to know, but leaves a basket of bread by your door every evening. Even your mother-in-law softens, her sharp words dulling into something closer to wary respect. By the time the first true snow falls, the path is open enough for a cart. You stand at its edge one morning, breath clouding in the cold, and feel something stir in your chest. Not pride exactly, but a fierce, steady joy. You've built more than survival here. You've built a way forward. And yet, as winter deepens, so does the weight of it. The Lord's men ride through the village, collecting taxes with eyes like flint. Rumors stir of disappearances, of villages punished for withholding grain one night. The stranger comes to your door again. They know someone's opened the road, he says. They think it's smugglers. Your husband stiffens beside you. What will they do? The stranger shakes his head. I don't know, but they're searching. You should be careful. You glance at the survival knot tied at your waist. The cord feels hot against your skin, pulsing with your heartbeat. You remember your mother's voice, bend like a reed that night. Sleep won't come. You sit by the hearth and watch the fire burn low, the shadows stretching long across the walls. Every sound outside seems louder. The wind, the creak of wood, the faint cry of a night bird. The village is vulnerable. You know it now. When the knock comes, it's soft but sure. You open the door to find Hilda standing there, cloak wrapped tight, eyes fierce. They're searching the miller's house next, she says. You need to hide what you've done and decide what you mean to keep. You turn to your husband, and in that glance everything is said. You take the knot from your waist and press it into his hand. If they come, burn it, you whisper, but keep the road. He hesitates, then nods. You'll go with Hilda? You smile faintly, just for tonight, together. You and Hilda slip into the woods. The path you cleared lies before you, pale with snow, shining faintly under the moon behind you. The mill's wheel creaks on, stubborn against the cold. You walk in silence until the village lights are distant stars behind you. Then Hilda stops. You've done something brave, she says, brave and dangerous. But that's how all change begins. You laugh softly. I didn't mean to start anything. No one ever does, Hilda replies. It's what survival becomes. When it grows teeth, you look down at the path, your path, and feel the weight of her words settle into you like roots in the distance. A faint glow rises, dawn or fire, or both. You can't tell yet. The air tastes of smoke and snow and something new. You turn back toward the village, heart pounding whatever waits there, discovery, punishment, or hope. You know one thing for certain. You are no longer the frightened bride who stood trembling by the hearth. You are the woman who built a road through fear, and as you start back toward the village, the knotless cord of your shift brushing your skin, the mill's faint hum carries on the wind, a promise that the world, no matter how cruel, can be reshaped by steady hands. The sun climbs higher, the snow begins to melt, and the path ahead, though shadowed, leads onward, winding toward a future that, for the first time, feels like it might truly be yours.